Well, the barn has been a literal dumpster fire for the last 4 or 5 years, really going back to COVID. It's been a long time since they even managed a winning record. It hasn't gone well with Hugh Freeze in his first 2 years, and Brian Harsin before that was just a complete disaster. They're rehauling the offense. They bring Jackson Arnold in through the transfer portal from Oklahoma. It seems like this is a last-ditch effort here in 2025 for Hugh Freeze to try to save his job at Auburn. Will he be able to do it? I'm going to let you know right now. It's time to do a game-by-game prediction for the Auburn Tigers. I know stuff. Yeah, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And in addition to that as well, hey, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We're about to hit 73,000 subscribers. We may have already hit it by the time this video goes live. We're getting pretty close. And I'm on a goal for 75K by the end of this year. So you guys help me out. Hit the thumbs up, leave comments on these videos. All that stuff helps. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you're not. Share a couple of the videos out on your social media. Help Uncle Lou out. Let's get to 75K. Time to preview Auburn for 2025. Now, it's no secret that Auburn has been driving a struggle bus for a few years. I mean, they've been through a couple of head coaches here after firing Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn was a mixed bag at Auburn. He had some successful years. I would argue no national titles, but he had some pretty good years. And it may seem now like they ran him off a little too soon, or maybe, you wish you could go back in time and keep him, but you never know that at the time. It obviously looks like a bad decision to fire him now because we see how it's gone with Harsin and Hugh Freeze. But anyway, that ship has sailed, and it's time for Hugh Freeze to poop or get off the pot, as they say. He had some success, Hugh Freeze did at Ole Miss, before getting ran out of town with a sort of an escort scandal, whatever all that was. I don't need to get into all that. Rehabilitated himself at Liberty, or at least pretended to. And now he gets another opportunity here in the SEC at Auburn. And going into the third year for Hugh Freeze, it hasn't gone well. And what's particularly strange to me about it, because I thought this hire would work. So I'm on the verge of having to admit I was wrong here, which I hate doing. I thought Hugh Freeze would have some success at Auburn. I think Auburn is a better coaching job generally than Ole Miss on one hand. On the other hand, maybe it's a little bit more difficult because of the pressure of playing up underneath Alabama in the same state. But I do feel like Auburn's got, you get more resources there. There's more support in general. There's more history at Auburn than there is at Ole Miss. So I guess there's some pluses and minuses, Auburn versus Ole Miss either way. But the success he had at Ole Miss generally centered around the offensive side of the ball. He had some successful quarterback play there. Hell, he beat Alabama there a couple of times. And when you look at what he's done at Auburn in his first couple of years, it's the offense that's holding him back. If you would have told me when Auburn hired Hugh Freeze that 2 years in he was going to have 2 losing seasons, and you'd asked me, what do you think the problem was? I would have said, well, I guess the defense was no good, and they just couldn't stop anybody. And it's really been the opposite. Their defense has been pretty good. We're going to talk about some of the numbers from last season in a minute, but the defense was okay last year. I mean, the defense was definitely better than the offense. The defense was good enough to have a winning record. The offense was absolutely horrible for the second year in a row. We'll look at some of the offensive numbers in a second too, but it's a surprise to me that it's been the offense under Hugh Freeze that has held Auburn back, because he's considered an offensive guy. And I'm going to be honest, the Jackson Arnold thing to me feels like a Hail Mary. It feels like, bottom of the ninth, you're down by 3, the bases are loaded, and you're up there taking home run swings. It feels like this has to work in order for Hugh Freeze to hang on to his job long-term at Auburn. One thing that he has done well there the first few years is recruit. Now, I know that's not the case like right now when you look at the recruiting rankings for next cycle, but I'm talking about the cycles that are already in the books under Hugh Freeze. He's recruited well. They got some great weapons at wide receiver. I actually like their offensive line. They return a bunch of pieces in the secondary. Let's just take a look at it. Last year, of course, like I mentioned, did not go well. 5-7 overall, only 2-6 in the SEC. And that's just not cutting it. At a place like Auburn, maybe you're going to get beat by Georgia and Alabama more times than not, 2 top 5 programs in all of college football that Auburn plays every single year. But to go 2-6 in the league is unacceptable to a place like Auburn. You got to get that turned around. And it's hard to find any big wins. It's not like they get a couple of big wins and then lose a couple of big games. Like, you look at their wins last year, Alabama A&M, New Mexico, they lose to Cal, who's just a horrible team. And they lost at home to Cal. It's just unacceptable. 4-game losing streak to Arkansas, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Missouri. Again, this is Auburn we're talking about. You got to be beating Arkansas. You could have beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma wasn't any good last year. You lost that game. The Missouri game. You say, well, these are close losses. Yeah, you lost by 4 to Missouri. You lost by 6 to Oklahoma. The turnover issue was a disaster for Auburn last year. The quarterback play has been a disaster under Hugh Freeze. These are things that just have to change going forward, or Auburn's going to continue to bump its head on this same ceiling, sort of floating around bowl eligibility. They got a win at Kentucky. Is that their best win? They beat Texas A&M in overtime. I get that was probably their best win. The home game right before the Bama game, which they lost 28-14. I guess the Texas A&M 4 overtime win would be the best win. It's a decent win, I guess. Texas A&M, of course, went 8-4 like they always do. But like, where's the big win? Where's something you can point to if you're an Auburn fan? What is something you can point to from Hugh Freeze? It's hard to find. It's hard to find a signature win. It's hard to find a big win. It's hard to find a big upset win. Texas A&M, I guess, at home, but still, like, it doesn't feel like there's any there right now with Hugh Freeze. It feels like Auburn is kind of just going through the motions. Can they get it turned around in 2025? Well, to state the obvious, it's going to depend on Jackson Arnold. The thing about Hugh Freeze, and I said this when he was hired, and again, I'm on the verge of having to admit I was wrong. I do think Hugh Freeze is a good coach. Now, my thoughts about Hugh Freeze as a person, as an individual, are well known. I can't stand him. I think he's a scumbag. But in terms of just his ability to be a head coach, I thought he was a good coach and a massive improvement over Brian Harsin. The wins and losses have not shown that yet, and the reason why has been obvious. It's been offense and specifically quarterback play. Multiple quarterbacks there. None of them have been any good. And the thing about Hugh Freeze and his offensive system, he has to have a quarterback that can run his system at a high level. That is a must. Without that, nothing else matters. Doesn't matter that you have Cam Coleman. Doesn't matter that you brought the kid in from Georgia Tech, the wide receiver who we'll talk about in a second. Doesn't matter how good these new running backs you're going to play this year might be. Doesn't matter that you get 3 offensive linemen back. None of that is going to matter if Jackson Arnold can't run this Hugh Freeze offense at a very high level. Some coaches, some systems, some schemes, some offensive philosophies are extremely quarterback dependent. Some are not. Auburn and Hugh Freeze's offense is an offense that is almost 100% dependent on the play of the quarterback. In other words, the quarterback has got to play at a high level in order for the offense to have any success at all. There are some other offensive systems out there where as long as the quarterback doesn't get in the way, the offense can be successful. Michigan a couple of years ago with J.J. McCarthy. Even Will Howard last year at Ohio State wasn't breaking any records, right? But he didn't blow it. He didn't lose them any games. He didn't turn the ball over 100 times, which is what Auburn's quarterbacks have been doing. Auburn's got to have that. And they bring in Jackson Arnold to do it. And this is a complete crapshoot and a roll of the dice because all of the problems that Auburn's offense has had the last 2 years under Hugh Freeze, every one of those problems was exhibited by Jackson Arnold last year at Oklahoma. Now, I do trust Hugh Freeze and the Auburn offensive staff more than I trust Brent Venables and last year's Oklahoma staff in terms of their ability to get the absolute most out of a quarterback, in this case, Jackson Arnold. And let's not forget, as bad as Jackson Arnold looked last year in his first year as a starter, he was a top 5 recruit in the country coming out of high school. Everybody wanted him. Your team wanted him. Whoever you are watching this video right now, whoever your favorite team is, they wanted Jackson Arnold. Like, the guy has talent, potential, and ability. Obviously, that didn't show through last year at Oklahoma. And if you're an Auburn fan, you're counting on what I just said sort of coming to fruition. Auburn and this staff being able to squeeze the most amount of juice possible out of Jackson Arnold, whereas hopefully last year, Brent Venables just was unable to get that, right? Along with the improvement you would expect in any player from year 1 to year 2. Now, there's another concern here, moving to a different offensive system. So if you're Jackson Arnold, you're sort of throwing out everything you learned last year and trying to learn something totally new. This has got to work. If it doesn't work, Auburn is going to have a losing record again, and Hugh Freeze is likely going to find himself out of a job at some point this season or by the end of the season. So let's take a look at the pieces they've got around Jackson Arnold. Now, they did bring in a couple of transfer wide receivers, like I mentioned, including Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, who had a really good year last year, with a quarterback that is really not known to be a great thrower of the football, so could potentially have a better year this year at Auburn even than he had last year at Georgia Tech. If Jackson Arnold can throw him the ball and not somebody on the other team, right? They actually brought in two transfer wide receivers to go along with the two young studs they have from last year's recruiting class that'll be sophomores now this year. 71st in the nation last year in offense. That's just unacceptable for a Hugh Freeze team. Again, this is an offensive guy. They're going to go as far as the offense takes them. The defense, we'll look at the numbers in a minute, were good enough for Auburn to win 7, 8, 9 games last year, but the offense just kept turning the ball over and just horrible quarterback play. They need to take a significant jump forward this season. Jackson Arnold, to me, and I think to everybody, is the key to whether or not that will happen or not. Horatio Fields is the other wide receiver they bring in from Wake Forest, who also had a pretty good year last year. That's in addition to the two guys they recruited a couple of years ago, Cam Coleman and Malcolm Simmons, two sophomore now wide receivers that played a lot last year that should take a significant step forward this year. Auburn, by the way, played a ton of freshmen last year. So you would think that would benefit them this year, that those young kids got all that experience last year. On the offensive line, I mentioned this already. They returned 3 starters, some interior guys. They are moving a tackle to guard. They brought in a transfer from Virginia Tech to play tackle, so they moved one of their tackles to guard. But they basically get 3 starting offensive linemen back, about half the offensive line. Jarquez Hunter is gone at running back, and that's a huge loss because he's been pretty much the only bright spot at Auburn offensively over the last couple of years. Cam Coleman had some good games last year, and I think he's a great, talented wide receiver. Again, you got to have a quarterback that can get him the ball. Cam Coleman had, I think, 8 touchdown passes touchdown catches last year. He's really, really good. But Jarquez Hunter's been sort of the MVP of that offense the last couple of years. Losing him is a blow that Auburn cannot replace. There's not a running back on this team as good as Jarquez Hunter. Now, you don't need sort of one individual running back to replace the production you got from Jarquez Hunter. You can use sort of a running back by committee approach, and that's what I think they'll do. They've got a couple of veteran guys, and they brought in a couple of transfer running backs. I think it's going to be your sort of prototypical running back by committee approach from Auburn. I think you'll see 3-4 running backs play in every single game for Auburn. Now, over on the defensive side of the ball, I talked about this. They were pretty good last year. Some of the numbers here, they were 28th nationally in points allowed. They only allowed 21 points per game. You guys know my thoughts on this. Today's college football is geared towards offense. All of the rules and sort of things that are in place make it easier on the offense, in my opinion. You can't even look at the quarterback anymore without it being roughing the passer. You've got all the targeting stuff that happens to the defense that allows wide receivers to be able to catch the ball a lot cleaner today than they could 15, 20 years ago. Some of the clock rules, just different things like that. Everything's sort of geared towards the offense. If you've got a defense that's holding your opponents to 21 points per game, you should be winning almost every game you play, in my opinion. An offense that can't score 25, 26, 28 points a game, that's a huge problem. And when you see a defense giving up 21 points per game, and then you look at that team's record and it's 5-7 or 6-6 or 4-8 or anywhere around there, that tells you right there that offense was absolutely horrible. Giving up 21 points per game, pretty good in today's college football. They were 9th in the country in yards allowed per rush attempt. This is the question I have for Auburn defensively. They were good all around last year defensively. They were better against the run, I think, than they were against the pass. And as far as who they keep and who they lose, they keep everyone in the secondary. They've got, I think, 4 starters back in the secondary. And most of the losses that they suffered on defense to graduation, draft, and transfer came in the front 7, which was the strength of the defense last year. So it could be flipped around. Maybe those guys last year who weren't great in the secondary, again, they were pretty good. They only gave up 21 points per game. I'm not shitting on them, but I think the front 7 in Auburn's defense against the run was better than the pass defense. Could be the other way around this year. You got all that experience returning in the secondary, and there's going to be a lot of new faces in the front 7. You get Caleb Harris, Kayan Lee, Sylvester Smith, Champ Anthony, all come back from the secondary. You add a couple of transfers to that too. I think the secondary is going to have a ton of experience and could be the strength of the Auburn defense this year. They also return a premier pass rusher in Kedrick Falk, who tied for the team lead in sacks last year with 7. He was second, I think, in tackles for loss last year with 10 or 11 tackles for loss, so he's a really good player that comes back. You do lose your leading tackler from last year, and you lose a couple of linebackers from last year that'll have to be replaced. So my question for Auburn defensively this year is in the front 7, whereas last year that was the strength of the team. All right, let's take a look at the odds. What does Vegas think Auburn can do in 2025? Again, it has not been good for 4 or 5 years in a row, so some of these numbers might not surprise you, but the win total, the expected number of wins for Auburn, according to the people who are willing to put their money where their mouth is on these things, is 7.5. I know you can't win 7.5 games, as these are betting numbers. So people are betting either over or under that number. So you think Auburn's going to be pretty good, you bet over 7.5, and you win the bet if they go 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, whatever, you get it. If you think they're going to be terrible again, you would bet under that 7.5, and you win the bet if they go 7-5, 6-6. 5-7, you get it. So this is just expected win total, 7.5. If he goes under that number, he's probably fired. Now, if he goes 7-5, but picks up a big win somewhere, maybe that's enough. And you say, well, we got Jackson Arnold coming back again for another year. Cam Coleman and those receivers will be back for another year. I think 7-5 is kind of the iffy zone. Anything over that, I think he definitely keeps his job. Below 500, I think it's almost certain he gets fired, but the expected win total sits at 7.5. What about winning the SEC? This is a long shot here, but they have better odds than some teams that might surprise you. So the favorites, obviously, in the SEC, you've got Texas as the favorite, Georgia right behind them, Bama at 3rd, LSU 4th, Texas A&M 5th, Florida actually 6th, and then Auburn with the 7th best odds to win the SEC. But that's better odds than Ole Miss, who nearly made the playoffs last year, better odds than Tennessee, who did make the playoffs last year, better odds than Oklahoma, better odds than South Carolina, who went 9-3 last year. So what you see from these numbers here with Auburn is that the win total 7.5, so but better odds to win the SEC than some of these other contenders. And I think the reason for that is this feels like a boom or bust year for Auburn to me. In other words, I find it hard to believe that Auburn's going to go 9-3. They're like, if everything clicks, they might win 10 games. If Jackson Arnold doesn't work out, they might win 5. And so I think that's why their odds to win the SEC are better than some of these other teams that maybe you feel more comfortable with. But the win total still only sits at 7.5 because it's such a flip of a coin, it seems like, anyway, with Jackson Arnold. All right, you can see I've got the schedule pulled up over there. Let's go through it game by game. I'm going to tell you what I think their record is going to be and give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Now, at this point in the offseason here, only a couple of weeks till the start of the season, I've done a ton of these team prediction videos. So a lot of the teams over here on Auburn's schedule, I've already done this video for them. So you know where I'm going with a lot of these games. Week 1 on the road at Baylor, Big 12 opponent. Baylor's got some expectations this year, too. Dave Aranda's been there for a while, and it hasn't worked out, but they ended the season hot last year and are expected to sort of pick that up here at the start of the season. This is an absolute must-win game for Auburn. If they don't win this game, it's hard to imagine Auburn even making a bowl game this year. Because of some of the more difficult games to come within the SEC. And this is not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination here for Auburn. It's a road game. Again, Baylor was hot last year. They've got expectations of their own. They've also got a coach in Dave Aranda who you feel a little disappointed in and feels like, needs to have a good year. You could say it's a must-win game for Baylor too. I think Auburn goes on the road and gets this win here at Baylor, and I feel like I'm giving Auburn some benefit of the doubt here, particularly when it comes to this offense and Jackson Arnold. When you've got this kind of change going on with an offense bringing in a new quarterback like this, a lot of times it can take several weeks for that offense to kind of get up to speed. Auburn doesn't have that luxury. They've got to be ready to go here week 1. I'm giving them some benefit of the doubt here. I'm going to give Auburn a win on the road at Baylor, because if they don't win that game, I think that spells bad news for Hugh Freeze and his future employment with the Auburn Tigers. Then they come back home for a couple of non-con games here against Ball State and South Alabama. I think they will win both of those games easily. And then, boy, it ramps up quick, fast, and in a hurry here. You look at these next 3 games. Now, they do have a bye week sprinkled in there, but at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, home against Georgia. Auburn will be an underdog in all 3 of these games. Even if they beat Baylor by 2 or 3 touchdowns, I think they're going to be an underdog on the road at Oklahoma, an underdog on the road at Texas A&M, and they will definitely be an underdog at home to Georgia. I think they lose both of these road games. I think Oklahoma is also going to be a lot better this year. Oklahoma had a lot of the same problems last year Auburn had. They've got a new quarterback too. The difference is the quarterback they're bringing in has proven that he can play at a high level. He comes from Washington State, where he put up video game numbers last year. And not only that, his offensive coordinator comes with him. So John Mateer, the quarterback I'm talking about, doesn't have to learn a new offense at Oklahoma. He's bringing his offense with him to Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold's learning a whole new offense here at Auburn, having left Oklahoma. This is a very interesting game because both of these coaches here, Hugh Freeze at Auburn and Brent Venables at Oklahoma, have been disappointing in their first few years at those schools. Oklahoma also only won 2 conference games last year, and you know Oklahoma's not going to put up with 2-win conference seasons for long at all. It could be a situation where the loser of this game is unemployed at the end of the year, but I've got Auburn losing. If it was in Auburn, you know, maybe I find a way to give Auburn the win there, but on the road at Oklahoma, I'm giving it to the Sooners. I think they're going to be a way better this year than they were last year. And then at Texas A&M, this is kind of my sleeper team to potentially make an SEC championship game. They were close last year. Had they beat Texas in the last game of the regular season, they would have been in the SEC championship game. Of course, they didn't beat Texas, so it doesn't matter. Ifs don't count. But I don't think Auburn and Jackson Arnold is going on the road and beating Texas A&M. I've got Auburn dropping back-to-back games here before this bye week. They're 3-2. And the Georgia game becomes a must-win, I think. Or Hugh Freeze could be fired in October. And I've done a Georgia prediction video. Like I mentioned, I've done a bunch of these prediction videos. You can click back and check out some of the other ones I've done if you want more of my thoughts on some of these teams. I actually think Auburn gets the win at home against Georgia. Georgia's a great team. They'll likely headed to the playoffs again this season, even with this loss to Auburn. But if you look at Georgia specifically, Auburn has a bye week before this Georgia game. And I think that is huge. It's a circle to wagons type of situation coming off back-to-back road losses, I think, for Auburn. They get a bye week. If anyone's been dinged up, they get a chance to get healthy. You get an extra week to prepare. You get Georgia at home. Georgia, on the other hand, is coming off of 2 games in a row against Bama and Kentucky. And while Kentucky's not a great team, they're a very physical team. Kirby talks about this all the time when it comes to Kentucky, that they are more beat up coming out of the Kentucky game every year than almost any other game on the schedule every single year. And they play Bama the week before that. I think Georgia, whether they win or lose those games, is going to be beat up coming out of that. Jordan Hare, a lot of weird things happen there. Georgia's got 3 main rivals, Auburn, Florida, and Georgia Tech, and they've beat them all 4 years in a row. They've beat Auburn every year since 2017. That's not going to last forever. Georgia is my favorite team, and maybe you're new to the channel and you're unaware. Georgia is my favorite team, and so I would love to be wrong here and for Georgia to get the win, but it just feels like Georgia's not going to beat all of their rivals every single year from now to the end of time. Georgia Tech had their chance last year and blew it, so I think Georgia beats Georgia Tech this year. I think last year was a chance for that. And I can't see Florida beating Georgia either. The G.J. Lagway iffy situation there health-wise. So if I'm trying to pick a game that Georgia's going to lose, this game makes sense for a lot of reasons. It's a rivalry game. They're not going to win all their rivalry games every year from now to the end of time. Auburn has a bye week to prepare for this game. It feels like a circle your wagons must-win situation for Auburn. It's at Jordan Hare, where we see weird things happen all the time. And Georgia, I think, will be a little beat up coming into this game, having played back-to-back games against Alabama and Kentucky. I think Auburn gets a huge win, the biggest win of the Hugh Freeze era at Auburn. I think they beat Georgia at home. They're 4-2. I also think they beat Missouri the following week at home, although beware of the hangover. You know, the students at Auburn are going to go out there and roll Toomer's weed or whatever that thing is that y'all worship, that tree or bush or whatever that is y'all worship out there. Try not to burn it down this time if you can. After you beat Georgia, Auburn, man, y'all burnt that thing down a couple of years ago for no reason. I'm half retarded, I guess. I don't know. But I think you will beat Missouri the following week at home unless you get caught celebrating too long from the Georgia win. But I'm giving you a win over Missouri. I think you lose the next week on the road at Arkansas, though. This is the thing about Auburn and teams like Auburn. They've got talent, right? Hugh Freeze has won big games before. He's been in the SEC. You know, he's at Ole Miss forever. He's been at Auburn for his third year. He knows the ins and outs of the SEC. What happens to teams like that? They get a big win every once in a while, in this case, Georgia at home, and then they turn around a couple of weeks later and lose to what I think is probably a pretty bad Arkansas team. It's just kind of the way college football goes. Does it make sense on the surface that a team could be good enough to beat Georgia and then turn around and lose to Arkansas? No, it doesn't make sense. But we see stuff like that happen every single year to almost every single team in college football. Almost every team beats somebody you don't expect them to beat and loses to somebody you don't expect them to lose to. I think that's the case for Auburn this year. They beat Georgia and Missouri at home, turn around, lose on the road to Arkansas. That quarterback there, Talon Green, is that his name? Feels like he's going to light somebody up this year. Arkansas is not a great team, but if that quarterback gets hot, he can create a lot of problems for defenses. Maybe it's that game there. Plus, it's a road game. I've got you losing on the road at Arkansas. You regroup, come back home. I think you'll beat Kentucky. I'm also going to give you a win on the road at Vandy. Now, I know Vandy's winning the national title this year because Diego Poverty, their quarterback, said so. But back here in reality, I think Vandy's winning about 4 games this year. And this ain't one of them. Now, an interesting or weird stat here between Auburn and Vandy. They've both been in the SEC for a long time. They've played about 30 times, I think. It's a 500 record. So just the weirdest thing. You would just, as bad as Vandy is generally, and I know Auburn's like really bad now or has been for 3 or 4 years, but they're not typically that. I mean, are they typically an 11-win team? No, but they're typically an 8 or 9-win team, it seems like. They're typically better than Vandy, right? Like if I told you Auburn and Vandy have played 30 times, what do you think the series record is? You'd probably say, I don't know, 20-10, 22-8. It's 500. So it's just a weird series with Auburn and Vandy, but I do think Auburn gets the win on the road at Vandy. Then you have your last bye week of the season before you play Mercer, an FCS team, in November for absolutely no reason at all. This is ridiculous. This is why the SEC needs 9 conference games. And yes, Georgia's my favorite team. And yes, Georgia does this too. And so does Bama, and so does everyone else in the SEC, and it's completely ridiculous. It's bad TV. It's bad football. No one wants to watch it. 12-team playoff. You've got playoff races being decided the next to the last week of the regular season in a lot of these huge conference games. And then you got to turn your favorite team on and see them playing Mercer or Austin Peay or the Citadel. It's completely ridiculous. The SEC ought to be embarrassed and ashamed. But of course, they're not. They're clinging to an 8-game conference schedule like it's oxygen. But you'll beat Mercer at home. Alabama at home, I don't think you win that one. I think Alabama's going to be really, really good this year, much better than last year. I've got Alabama at 11-1. The only loss for them on the road at South Carolina. I don't think they are losing the Iron Bowl. I think Hugh Freeze drops his 3rd straight Iron Bowl, right? Would that be right? This is his 3rd year there, right? Don't think they beat Alabama. So how many wins, how many losses? Losses on the road at Oklahoma and Texas A&M, a loss on the road at Arkansas, and a loss at home to Bama. But that's 8-4. Now, 8-4 isn't necessarily what Auburn fans were looking for in year 3 when they hired Hugh Freeze 3 years ago. You thought maybe by year 3 would be the year Auburn was making a push towards the SEC championship game or the playoffs. While I don't see that happening for Auburn this year, I do think they will have a massive improvement, at least in terms of wins and losses. Struggled to make a bowl game really over the last 5 or 6 years. This year, I think much better. Now, I'm going to admit this is a crapshoot prediction here because so much of this hinges on whether or not Jackson Arnold can run this offense at a high level. And the problem is, not only is Hugh Freeze has had a hard time finding a quarterback to run this offense at a high level for the last 3 years. Jackson Arnold was a turnover machine at Oklahoma, and that was Auburn's biggest problem last year was turnovers. So then you go and you bring in a quarterback out of the portal who also had turnovers. So this is a huge risk. I talked about that already at the beginning. 8-4 is extremely dependent on Jackson Arnold having way more good games than bad games. If that's not the case, if he turns the ball over like he did last year, if Auburn doesn't find an answer in the ground game to replace Jarquez Hunter, Auburn's going to be looking at another 5-win season here. They'll lose to Georgia. They'll lose to Baylor. They may even lose to Vandy on the road. And Hugh Freeze will definitely be out of a job. I'm sort of splitting the difference here. I don't think this is some kind of home run season for Auburn. If they're able to keep a lot of their key players from this season into next year, 2026, and you can get Jackson Arnold to come back after having this is assuming they go 8-4, so a pretty good year, and Jackson Arnold plays well. And then you look forward to next year and you say, well, we got Jackson Arnold coming back again. We got Cam Coleman coming back at wide receiver. Maybe you found one of these running backs that stands out. They get him to come back next year. You get some offensive line, the defense play, and maybe then next season, 2026, maybe that's the year. So just a year late, maybe you thought year 3 would be the year for Hugh Freeze. Maybe it becomes year 4. So we'll see. But I've got Auburn at 8-4, a huge win at home against Georgia. Disappointing loss, I guess, maybe on the road at Arkansas, and a couple of other difficult road losses to Oklahoma and Texas A&M before losing the Iron Bowl at home to what I think is going to be a really good Alabama team. Auburn 8-4 in year 3 for Hugh Freeze. All right, appreciate you watching. Make sure you've hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let me know down below what you think about Auburn in 2025. Which games do I have wrong? Feel free to let me know. Appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.